This is the Tree of Life, Season 20, Chapter 5. In this episode, we will be talking about the allocation of spatial territoriality. To start off, spatial territoriality is defined in its very nature as an exclusionary proprietary space. This space typically forms around the vessel. There are two forms of allocations. 1. There are allocations provided within hierarchical natural law, according to a hierarchy by priority. 2. There are allocations provided by the linking of negation to common objects, through linking of dissonant spaces. Allocations provided within hierarchical natural law are determined by the individual higher within the hierarchy than the subject. This means, for example, that substitution events are terminated by authority or force within that hierarchy compelling acquiescence. In the context of reverse substitution events, hierarchical natural law determines allocations as a function of the acquiescence which preceded it. This means that the territoriality reflects ownership of the fruits of one's labors by the outgoing consciousness. Now, this does not mean that hierarchies are necessarily rigid. Hierarchies can flip back and forth, resulting in territoriality and ownership shifting back and forth. The usual method by which this occurs is through proprietary experience channels during the substitution event. Typically, hierarchical natural law produces archetypal consensuality. Allocations which occur through the linking of dissonant spaces are also exclusionary, but are not fixed. That is to say, a hierarchy, to the extent of its rigidity, is fixed. There is no movement of territoriality between the levels of that hierarchy, but rather it is determined by priority. Allocations described by spatial non-consensuality are not fixed in this fashion, but are rather fluid. The territoriality is in play. Thus, when territoriality is in play, it is entirely exclusionary or proprietary. Unlike under hierarchical natural law, where there may be a number of levels within the hierarchy establishing distinct levels of priority. Allocations of these two types are circumscribed in one of two ways. For the first type, acquiescence is compelled by force or authority whilst the subject is within a substitution event, establishing priority. For the second type, the dissonant spaces must be fragmented, as set out in Season 20, Chapter 4. This involves either fragmentation manually, or digitally, or segmentation of the negational valence string by way of a structural adjustment like displacement mirroring. Allocations determined by hierarchy suffer from the enforcement problem, which is to say, that maintaining the allocation requires use of force to compel compliance, not within the experience of the subject, but rather upon the vessel whilst they are in a dissociative state. Allocations created by spatial non-consensuality do not suffer from this problem, although their indiscriminate imposition of acquiescence is inherently force-related. Which is to say, that allocations reflecting spatial non-consensuality are not purely eliminated by force. Although both forms of allocation require force as enforcement of priority. In one, it is reactionary to exceeding priority, in the other it is essential to the allocation itself. Now, affirmational rhythms described in Season 20, Chapter 1, are linked to particular forms of natural law within distinct substitution events. Affirmational rhythms are linked to tautological natural law within reverse substitution. Thus, the sexual and wakefulness cycles create a network of common affirmation through emotional coupling. Negational rhythms are linked to compelling acquiescence. This acquiescence can manifest in response to a priority allocation pursuant to hierarchical natural law at the conclusion of a substitution event. Or it can be linked to force applied within a substitution event to others pursuant to a spatial non-consensual state. The enforcement problem created by compelling acquiescence is however eliminated by the incoming consciousness in reverse substitution, whilst being also linked to affirmational bodily rhythms or cycles. That's the end of the podcast for today.